following announcement has been paid for by the
Hey, this is JayV coming at you with an Elite Mark Order podcast short. Joining me tonight is Cosmic Scott, and today we're going to talk about the new AEW Collision roster.
Toxic Collision.
Toxic Collision. So apparently, some of the rumors are saying that CM Punk is going to come back and he is going to lead this new Collision show on Saturday nights from 8 to 10. And we're going to find out more in a couple days on the next episode of Dynamite. So, who better to headline your roster than CM Punk? And so, and we see people like Thunder Rosa and Miro, which we might draft, being potentially associated with this. So Scott and I decided that we would do an AEW Toxic Collision draft. So we're each going to pick a wrestler, explain why they fit this Toxic Collision roster, and go from there. And we'll see how our picks play out. One more thing I want to say is this is a comedic look. We respect all the talent involved, but we're just poking fun at some of the internet memes that, people see talking about guys on Twitter and things like that. So Scott, anything to add before I get rolling with my first pick?
Yeah, first of all, this is expected to be enjoyable, so let's not get too heavy. And that includes me and my picks. First and foremost, don't forget to go to EliteMarkOrder.com, click on Join the Discord, and join us in the Discord where we have all these wonderful conversations that lead to podcasts like this. I want to give a shout out to Sentinel in our chat room, as well as Willis. What you talking about, Willis? Appreciate your guys' support in the chat, and we'll try to include you guys as much as possible. So let's get to this, shall we?
All right. Also, I want to give a shout out to Kuba for designing the graphic that you see in the YouTube thumbnail, and also want to give a shout out to Krillin, because in a podcast short we did a couple weeks ago, he had some of the ideas and comments that kind of led up to this. So I wish Krillin could join us tonight, but he is a little under the weather and he is taking it easy. So off we go. And now I'm about to reveal my first pick. Of course, it's already been mentioned. CM Punk has to be the first pick. He quit WWE. He quit UFC. He quit AEW when he was the heavyweight champion. Well, I suppose he didn't quit, but he went into business for himself at a press conference, threw his owner under the bus, threw the title under the bus, threw Hangman under the bus, threw the Bucks under the bus, and acted like the most unprofessional twit that you could possibly imagine in the history of wrestling. So there is nobody more toxic and more perfect to lead this roster than CM Punk. And also, we'll mention that, CM Punk loves Wrestling Observer. He's a huge fan of Dave Meltzer and Brian Alvarez. And that should lead to some more fun on this show. And, hey, he's probably the second or third biggest draw in wrestling right now, even though he has multiple botches every match and gets hurt all the time. But hey, this is what our Chicago fans want to see. So congratulations, CM Punk. You're the number one pick. Scott, take it away with number 2.
I got to tell you, by the way, that's a fantastic number 1 pick, because who better than CM Punk to lead Toxic Collision? Now, for me, I had to dig deep. Now, I know you went with CM Punk, and certainly in AEW, he is by far the most divisive, most dramatic, most damaging that I've seen. But there's one guy who's bigger. There's one guy who's fucked up multiple companies. There's one guy whose ego is so massive, he has forced entire companies to kneel to his whim, and then he's left high and dry to go somewhere else. There's only one man who could possibly be more toxic than anybody else alive or dead in wrestling today than Hulk Hogan. My number 1 hated wrestler. I've never liked him. Even when I was a young man. Even when I was 6, 7, 8, watching those Saturday morning wrestling shows, I hated Hogan from day one. He's the most toxic wrestler I've ever seen or heard.
now would be the perfect time for a cameo from Toothless Hogan.
I tried. He's just unavailable. He's getting his hair cut. All one of them.
He's getting his
single hair. He's like Charlie Brown. He just sort of swirls it around a little bit.
Oh, I suppose if you still got
actually,
one, you might as well.
To be quite honest, he's got the Picard.
He's got the card.
The Picard hair. it's just sort
Picard,
of bald.
Picard. Okay,
the Picard hair. It's sort of like the,
yeah,
sort of like that robot guy from from Star Wars at Lando Calrissian's.
Lobot?
The guy with the thing on the back of his head that was
Lobot.
escorting. Okay, fine.
Yeah, right. It was Lobot, right?
You're probably right. I don't remember the dude's name.
You're a Star Wars fan. I'm not a Star Wars fan.
I'm a Star Wars fan, but it doesn't mean I memorized every frickin' character.
I had to figure. So, anyhow. All right. So, yeah, Hulk Hogan, good pick.
Yeah.
All right. My number 2 pick is going to be, we need someone to headline the women's roster, to lead the women's division, and that is going to be Tessa Blanchard.
That was actually my number 2.
Nice.
That really was.
Agreement. Tessa was at the first All In show. She's Tully's daughter, and she has Tully's attitude, and she has Tully's propensity for defiance. Tessa doesn't go with what you tell her to do. Tessa does her own thing. And Tessa will bully you in the locker room if you're not up to her standards. Tessa will bully you in the ring. She'll stiff you in the ring. She will win a predominantly male promotions heavyweight title, like Impact, and then just leave and never come back with it. Tessa will do the things that define the word toxic, and she is a perfect second to CM Punk on Toxic Collision. So Tessa Blanchard, welcome. Look forward to seeing your in-ring work. And hopefully you can maybe, calm down a little bit outside the ring and maybe have a good career. But we'll see what happens. In this environment with all these wonderful people, all these wonderful peers you'll be working with, I'm sure, things are going to work out great.
Oh, yeah. Tessa's definitely not going to be a problem. I never. Now, I know that number 2 probably should have been Thunder Rosa. Because much like CM Punk, she showed up at Tony's door, so she's an obvious pick. We're not anyways. I wanted to avoid her, but I wanted to go with the women's also. I picked Tessa, but I had a backup. Now, I had somebody who was so toxic, she got somebody else in the company fired. She herself wasn't very successful, but she demanded a spotlight as if she were Britt Baker. She was terrible in the ring, and unfortunately, she wasn't able to compete as often as necessary due to an illness. And she brought it all forward in the public eye and then accused Tony of being a racist. None other than Big Swole to face off against Tessa Blanchard because she truly is as toxic as it gets.
Yeah, she accused Tony Khan of not having enough Arabic representation in the company.
And apparently he's Pakistani.
Realizing that Tony's Pakistani.
That's a dumb move, but she also accused him of having racist ideas when she didn't get to win the TBS title. Jade did, who's also a black woman, so he's racist because he didn't choose the short black woman.
I'm not really sure.
But she's toxic.
Yeah, but Swole unfortunately had her little meltdown. I've met Swole in person, and she was the nicest person. And
yeah,
my friend, shout out Jamie. Jamie had a really long discussion. He probably talked to her for like an hour at this thing. Like, she was super cool. So it was so surprising to see her kind of melt down on her exit. And I think, part of that, just in defense of Swole, might be, some of the health challenges that she has that I'm.
Oh, yeah.
But still, just before you start playing cards like that, just use some better judgment. Anyhow, Big Swole is Scott's number 2. So my number 3 pick.
Yes.
I want to go for a challenger for CM Punk, but we need a personality in this promotion that can announce. We need a personality that can be a manager. We need a personality that can provide commentary, and we need the most toxic individual in the podcast industry, Jim Cornette.
Oh, good choice.
I mean, it doesn't get any more toxic than this. He complains about everything and anything that will get his ratings up, anything that will keep those Attitude Era WWE fans hanging by a thread to still come on Twitter and check in, look into wrestling stuff and complain how, the Attitude Era did it right, or everything was right in the 80s when the Midnight Express was feuding with the midgets known as the Rock and Roll Express. Or wait, they're the same size as the Bucks, but the Bucks are vanilla midgets, and the Rock and Roll Express was the greatest thing to ever happen because they got an incredible amount of cheers in Lexington, Kentucky. I don't know. But, Jim Cornette is my pick. He can manage. He can announce. He could be CM Punk's manager. I mean, could you imagine that combination, that match made in heaven?
Oh, yeah. That would
Jim Cornette, my number 3 pick.
That is an amazing pick because even now, Jim Cornette oozes toxicity. And just having him on the roster, let alone announcing, let alone managing, just being around the wrestlers would create a massively toxic environment. So that is an amazing choice. Now, my decision, my next choice, is somebody who is absolutely toxic in the past. Not as much anymore because he sort of learned his lesson. But this is a man who had the book in WCW. This is the man who decided, you know what, Goldberg's streak needs to end to me. This is the man who booked the finger punch of doom. This is the man who helped destroy an entire federation. Yes, he popped the territory. He also brought it crashing down because he and Scott Hall had matching contracts where anybody who got paid more, they got the same rate of pay. That didn't help, and WCW was destroyed because of the Booker man, Kevin Nash. Now again, he's improved as of late, but he was one of the most toxic wrestlers ever in the locker room.
Kevin was an interesting character. He, I probably listen to his podcast more than anyone else's. I don't straight up listen to the entire thing. I just watch clips of it on YouTube. Because him and I forget his co-host's name, but he's really good. He does a ton of podcasting stuff too.
Conrad or something.
Not Conrad. It's I can't remember the guy's name. But he's been doing shoot interviews forever.
Yeah.
But yeah, I do enjoy Kevin Nash's commentary, and it's interesting when he talks about some of the mistakes that he made, and he seems to have owned up to a lot of the things that he did were wrong, and he talks about stories and pressures that we as fans weren't aware about, and he can almost justify some of those things. But yeah, Kevin Nash certainly has run with the mantra that I didn't wrestle because I liked the industry or that I cared for anyone else. I did it just to make money, and that was all I cared about. So I did the absolute minimum, and hell, I'm a millionaire, so screw you if you don't like it.
Don't get me wrong. I'm a Wolfpack fan. I still have an NWO red and black hanging in my closet from the day, back in the day. The fact is, I am a fan of Kevin Nash, but that doesn't stop him from being extraordinarily toxic. That's why he was my number 3 choice.
All right, nice pick. Okay, coming in at my number 4, he's already been teased for Toxic Collision. He showed up on Dynamite last week and walked into Tony Khan's dressing room. And it's none other than Miro. Miro, who allegedly refused to work because he wasn't booked to win a battle royal and refused to be eliminated in a battle royal because his character was too valuable to take that big L in a battle royal with 20 other competitors. None of those guys were on his level. So I'm booking Miro He is my number 4 pick. He's going to start right out in the program with CM Punk. And oh boy, it's going to be interesting to see how this goes. What do you think, Scott? I know you're a Miro fan.
I had Miro on my list because he is, proven that he's difficult to work with or something. Now, I don't know if it was he refused to lose at a battle royal. I believe he was supposed to be in a program with House of Black, and something in the program, quote unquote, conflicted with his religion. So that's the sort of angle I think he went, and they're like, okay, you can't fire a guy for that. You can't punish a guy for that, but you can certainly cool him off and let him soak his heels for a while. And I think that's sort of what Tony did. Miro's ready to come back. He's got the next program ready. Okay, bring him in. I had him on my list. Obviously, I'm going to choose someone else. But I can't argue the choice of Miro because he does have that element of toxicity. Not as bad as some of the others, but certainly he's got a bad rep for something backstage that got him pulled from the show.
All right. So what's your next pick?
Now, for me, I'm also going with somebody who's a current podcaster. This is somebody who back in the day was a nobody. He had nothing, no influence, no fans. He barely had a career, but he carried the bags for some of the really important people in the show. And now, as a podcaster, he thinks he somehow knows the industry and knows the business. But realistically, he was a nobody who happened to latch on, who happened to be a huge leech to the most popular act in the business. And I'm talking about none other than Glenn, what is fucking last name? Forget it. Something. Disco Inferno. I forget his last name. I don't care. He's not important enough to know. Disco Inferno was a joke of a character. He was a joke of a wrestler. He was never popular. The only time he had any sort of anything was when he was literally carrying the bags of the NWO Wolfpack. Fuck Disco. He's an asshole, and fuck his podcast.
I didn't mind Disco as a mid-carder back in the day in the NWO era of WCW. He was mildly entertaining, and he was always fun to watch him get his ass kicked just because he was annoying. Which isn't exactly the greatest skill to have. That's not going to sell T-shirts. It's not going to make people tune in. But it just reminds me of I think my favorite tweet in the history of Twitter. Glenn Gilberti, the Disco Inferno, posts, "Nobody knows how to work anymore. They would rather kill each other to get Dave Meltzer, blah, 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 blah." So Cody replied, and this is my favorite tweet ever, to Disco. "Stop. You know nothing. You have drawn $0. No fan has ever left a show thinking about you. You were lucky to be a juiced up double lifer, quote, over with the boys, end quote, type in an era where you hid in plain sight, coasting on other success. Couldn't hang then, can't get booked now." End of tweet. Greatest tweet ever. And that sums up Disco's entire existence.
Absolutely. I thought he was absolutely worthless as a wrestler. He was so bad at one point, his character gimmick was, I forgot my own finisher. And in the middle of the match, he sort of started it, half started it. Then he picked out a piece of paper, opened it up, looked at it, and then got his finisher on. The worst wrestler, the worst gimmick, the most toxic. He deserves toxic Collision.
I miraculously haven't blocked Disco on Twitter, but anytime he says something stupid that ends up on my feed, I post the animated gift of Effie, and this is Disco's retirement match because no one will book him anymore. Effie, one of the GCW wrestlers, basically he's wearing like a thong or a G-string into his match, has Disco in the corner, and he's rubbing his junk in Disco's face
Yeah.
Like it's like a X-Pac move, the Bronco Buster. He's like Bronco Bustering his package all over Disco's face, and Disco ended up losing that match shortly after that happened to him. So Disco kind of shut up after I post that on his after his tweet. So
but couldn't happen to a nicer guy.
Yeah. Yep. So for someone to criticize the current product, someone to criticize the boys that are busting their asses today, for him to go out like that on top of his joke of his career, dude, shut the hell up. I don't know why people listen to that show.
I don't either. But that was my number 4.
All right. Coming in at number 5. She's hurt a lot of people. She's launched careers into the stratosphere by breaking their noses and making them bleed on TV. She's broken ribs. She's thrown people into railings and hurt them. She's hurt everybody she's gotten in the ring with. And her name is Nia Jax. I think Toxic Collision you could use someone like that who just injures people left and right. And then goes on Twitter and complains that, the fans hurt my feelings when they talk about how I injure people. That really hurts me. So my question to Nia, does that hurt you as much as it hurts the opponents that you've injured and who've you've made them miss out on paychecks because they're unable to wrestle because you stiffed them too hard or you've clumsily fell on them and broke their ribs? I don't know. But I think Nia is a perfect addition to this roster. What do you think, Scott?
Well, unfortunately, Nia Snacks is absolutely injury prone. She was not a very good worker. She was not a very safe worker. She was pulled up green before she was entirely trained, and she got over because her cousin's The Rock. Yeah. I don't really think she has much to offer as a wrestler, and she's shown on Twitter that she is a toxic person.
Yeah, and she could start a bloodline faction on Collision to challenge Punk. I mean, hell, why not?
You know what? She could be the head of the table if she didn't eat it.
There you go.
So that was a beautiful number 5 choice. Now, I'm not going with the women's division with this one. However, I am going with a gentleman who has been hired by all of the biggest companies and quit all of the biggest companies. Some in rapid succession. He has officially retired 3 times and come back 3 times. He actually got fired because of Big Swole because he also decided to call out Tony Khan in public on Twitter as a racist.
Apologize.
And demanded an apology. You know I'm talking about none other than Lio fucking Rush. Now, he's the biggest waste of potential because he's actually a really good wrestler. He's actually a really good talker. But he is one of the most toxic people I've ever heard about. Who the fuck comes in and after 6 months retires, gets hired by somebody else, 6 months later retires, and then gets hired by a third company and retires? Enough already. Stop hiring Lio Rush. He's not worth it.
Poor Lio.
Poor Lio. Poor whoever hires him.
True, that's true as well.
Anyways, what's your next pick?
For me, she was mentioned earlier. Got to go with Thunder Rosa.
Yeah, that's a good pick.
She's been previewed. She went into Tony's office too after Miro. I don't know if Miro and Thunder Rosa were in there with Tony at the same time. Like maybe they were all starting a new faction or something.
They were all hiding in the bathroom with Adam Cole.
I mean, it could be. But yeah, Thunder Rosa. When she first came to AEW, I mean, I think everyone loved her. She was incredible in the ring and was elevating the division and was having incredible matches with Serena Deeb. And then she won the title and she started like making her opponents look bad. She started sandbagging them and then, not working their moves and making them look sloppy. And then she would go on Twitter and deny it. And the next thing you know, she's crying in an interview and says she's done. And some people say it's because of an injury. Some people says it was because she was being so toxic backstage that she was stripped of the title and forced to become an announcer. So I don't know what the deal is. There's some insight into that with All Access with Britt Baker talking about how, Thunder Rosa was the champion, but had all these other interests and venues and things she was traveling for and wasn't promoting AEW. But hey, Thunder Rosa, we've already seen it. We've already been teased it. Perfect addition to Toxic Collision.
Yeah, Thunder Rosa, I like her because behind the scenes, what I've seen is appealing. Her interactions with Simon Miller, really, really cool. So that's sort of, I'm like, it's hard to believe. But then at the same time, behind the scenes, some people are really fucking toxic. And it's hard to believe, but it is understandable that Thunder Rosa would ultimately be your number 6 pick. Now, for me, I'm going way back to just a few years ago. The only person really to have ever been fired by AEW for some really bad allegations. And I'm going with Jimmy Havoc. He's a UK wrestler who I thought maybe, he had some sort of career. People seemed really big on him. I didn't know much about him. And then the next thing I know, he got fired for some really fucked up allegations. What do you know about him?
I really enjoyed Jimmy Havoc bringing that hardcore element to AEW. I loved his match with Janela and Darby. Their hardcore matches. I really enjoyed seeing those hardcore matches mixed into the show. I kind of thought the staple thing was stupid because he wasn't really shooting staples out of the gun, at least most of the time. Like in ECW, they would actually see the guys with staples in there. He wasn't doing that, so I thought it was kind of stupid. Like the fake staple to the groin. It always got a good decent pop from the crowd, but it was kind of tough to see the allegations come out against Havoc and just some really nasty stuff, some personal issues, abuse in his life, both ways, and he was let go from AEW because of that. So yeah, obviously Jimmy Havoc did have some toxicity issues, but it's unfortunate it ended his career. But hey, you got to take responsibility for your actions. You can't go beating up your partner unless you're Stone Cold Steve Austin, apparently.
He was in WWE. You can get away with murder.
Sure. Literally, Jimmy Snuka.
No, wait. That's my next pick. Damn it.
Oh, he's no longer with us, though. He can't be drafted.
Why not? Anybody through space and time.
You're right. Any rule, anything goes.
Anybody through space and time. I'm going for primetime Snuka, off the cage Don Morocco Snuka, pre-murder. But anyways, we'll get into that in a second. What's your number 7 pick?
Number 7 is someone who's no longer a current wrestler, but someone who's still a celebrity. And this person got screwed. And some people would say Vince screwed this person. And other people would say this person screwed himself. This person, I think, invented bitching in wrestling. This is bullshit.
He perfected it.
Yeah, the innovator, the originator of toxicity in pro wrestling, Bret the Hitman Hart.
The excellence of toxic execution.
The excellence of toxicity. Yeah, you got to go with Bret here. A lot of complaining. Still complaining about Hulk Hogan. He just could never get over the fact that Hogan was more popular than him and Hogan sold more tickets. So I think part of that is instead of being toxic and hating someone and complaining about how they have less wrestling ability than you is, maybe find another way to get your character over. Maybe when you were heavyweight champion of WWF and the company was losing money and was like starting to you get close to bankruptcy because you weren't drawing, maybe look inwards and maybe look what works and what gets, it's not always about doing the same 5 moves perfectly every match. You got to do more to get the crowd engaged, make people come and want to see you wrestle, than run into the turnbuckle at full speed once a match. So Bret Hart, he is my pick for number 7. In this capacity, he could be an announcer Or he could come out and he could second Miro to the ring to fight against Jim Cornette and CM Punk in the main event. It would be epic. It would be toxic. It would be wonderful.
It would be both toxically epic and epically toxic.
That's right.
My number 7 is also a WWE wrestler of history. We all know him. Back in the day, we all loved him. Jimmy Snuka, a known murderer. The only reason why he's not serving any prison time is he's mentally incompetent because of CTE. And, you know, I didn't want to get too dark. I wanted to choose some fun people, but goddamn, Jimmy Snuka was toxic. So I had to throw him in there. You managed to time it just perfect. So I applaud you on knowing that my next pick was Jimmy Snuka.
Yeah, Jimmy Superfly killed his girlfriend. I think it was 83 in Allentown. Yeah. I don't know what happened. I don't know if he was blacked out. They were goofing around and he swung her into the... I don't know. I mean, I shouldn't speculate. You know, I feel sorry for the family and everything they've had to go through. But, you know, Snuka was obviously lying about what happened. Vince McMahon walks in with the briefcase, walks out, and, Jimmy Snuka's still wrestling, and the charges mysteriously disappeared.
Yeah.
Just an interesting case all around. I'd like to see more information on why, and I think there was even a dark side of the ring about this.
Yeah.
But like, why wasn't the family able to get things escalated? Like, what, you know, it's just kind of crazy that whole situation was able to be happening. But yeah, Jimmy Snuka, loved him as a kid.
Vince had power. Vince had a lot of power, a lot of influence, and Jimmy Snuka was not white. Yep. And that carried a lot in the 70s and the 80s.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And that sort of, you know, Jimmy Snuka got away with it. Loved him as a kid, but man, once I found out what really happened, it's hard to not say he's extraordinarily toxic. And that's why he's my number 7 pick. We move on to number 8.
All right, number 8 for me is going to be, and you had mentioned tag teams, I'm going with FTR.
Yeah.
I don't think a more decorated tag team has ever complained. And of course, this is only... Cash doesn't complain. Cash doesn't say much. Cash just does his job. Dax Harwood is toxic.
He's a loudmouth.
He's always complaining on Twitter. He has 3 heavyweight tag titles in 3 different promotions, and he complains because he doesn't have a 4th. Complains about the Young Bucks when the Young Bucks aren't booking. The Young Bucks don't book their matches. You think the Young Bucks don't want to fight FTR? He complains about, you know, CM Punk not getting respect. He complains about everything.
Yeah.
Complains about, you know, working conditions, complains about the Click. You know, here's a guy complaining that, you know, someone made a snarky remark about him tearing his bicep. You know, was it Nash? Was it Hall? I don't know. But yeah, Dax Harwood constantly complaining, never satisfied. You know, one of Tony's favorites for sure. So Dax Harwood leading the tag division on Toxic Collision.
Much like CM Punk, beloved by Tony, and Tony's willing to give them extra room to just sort of be them. They're the biggest cheerleaders to bring back CM Punk. So, you know, we'll see where things go. This is certainly going to turn things. It's going to be interesting. This is with All In, with the rush of all the different pay-per-views, with the new deal coming in, with the new show. There's so much buzz about the company. We'll see where things go. Now for me, I'm digging again once into the well. Now this is somebody who currently is not toxic. From what I've seen, has been able to turn things around a little bit, hasn't let things get him down, but has been one of the most verbally toxic, divisive, inflammatory, just able to get everybody to dislike him, not just in the ring, but in the locker room. Not quite Miz changing in the hallway levels, but pretty damn close. I'm going with none other than Enzo Amore. Because
nice pick.
That man is toxic. Now, again, he may not be, he's cleaned up, things have changed. Him and Big Bill have had a lot of change of heart over the last few years. But the stories going around, that dude backstage was not good for the locker.
Enzo, there were a lot of people that did not like Enzo. I mean, Neville or Pac basically quit WWE, I think, because of Neville.
Yeah.
They made Pac lay down for Enzo, which he was not happy about. But yeah, there was not a lot of positive press coming out from other wrestlers about his conduct in the locker room. Basically, you don't need to act like you do in the ring in the back, and that's what was happening. So Enzo, a perfect addition to this toxic roster of AEW Collision. All right, so why don't we each pick one more? We'll wrap it up at 10 each.
Okay, that's fair. Now this is going to be hard because I have some good ones. We'll go quickly. We'll choose our last one. We'll do that, and then at the end we'll go over the ones that we didn't get to talk about in depth. Just kind of go over them rapid fire.
All right, sounds good. So for me, my number 9 pick is the Marine that kicked Shawn Michaels' ass in Syracuse in 1995 and beat his ass so bad that Michaels was unable to defend his Intercontinental title and he was stripped because he was in the hospital. So whoever that Marine was, I'm signing him up for Toxic Collision. We need someone to keep all these fuckers in line. So I can't think of a better pick than this Marine that kicked. Now, Shawn Michaels said it was 6 people that kicked his ass, but I have a feeling it was probably just one. You know, Michaels was blackout drunk and said the wrong thing to his woman and got destroyed. And apparently, you know, Shawn was there with Davey Boy Smith, who it's like, there's not too many people that could take on Davey Boy Smith. I mean, that boy was a monster. And X-Pac was there too. And apparently they were stuck in the car and could not get out of the car to save Shawn Michaels from his beatdown. Maybe they thought he deserved it. So yeah, Michael, whoever that Marine was, props to you. You're on the roster. You'll have to join the Elite Mark Order. You can just go to our elitemarkorder.com and sign up for a discard, and we will get you a job on AEW Collision. So see you there.
I thought for sure, because of the toxicity, it would have been Shawn Michaels. But you wanted the Marine. I get it. For me, once again, I'm digging into the well of some people who really, 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 really questionable lifestyle choices. He seemed to be full of potential and was really successful at becoming a professional wrestler in his evolution in NXT from just some dude into the Velveteen Dream. I thought he had a real future. But turns out he's a little toxic and a bit of a pedo, bit of a groomer, wanted to get himself some of that young. And that's somebody you want on Toxic Collision because they are going to bring in the right element. They're going to bring in those very malleable young minds and make them fans forever if they don't, molest them and traumatize them for the rest of their life. Hopefully they don't. They just, manipulate them to be energetic fans. Because that's the narcissistic personality, is to get people to worship them. And then we don't have them use them, we just get them to worship them. That's how you utilize that toxic personality.
Right, yeah, the Dream's mistake was, I mean, it's okay to have sex in high school, unless you're not in high school and you're beyond high school.
Also be in high school, exactly.
Velveteen Dream forgot he wasn't in high school, and sorry, that's off limits after you're out. So he had to learn the hard way.
Not good.
It cost him his a really promising career. I mean, people really liked him. He had a lot of talent, a lot of charisma, but you shouldn't be using wrestling to groom high school kids to hook up. Sorry, bad idea. That's toxic. You are on this show, whether you like it or not.
That's the end of our official draft. Let's kind of go through our last 3 picks and just see what we have.
I got number 10. We got to do number 10. And
we'll do that. That's fine.
So my last pick isn't so much a wrestler, It's a wrestler's blood that is toxic, literally toxic. My number 10 pick is Abdullah the Butcher's hepatitis C.
Oh my god!
So Abdullah's Hep C infected other wrestlers.
It wouldn't be a problem,
including that class act up in Canada, Hannibal. And Hannibal was on his way to WWE and I don't know if he was going to have a promising career, but he was going to have a job at WWE, but he failed his blood test on the way in because he was infected by Abdullah's Hep C.
Here's the thing. Having hepatitis isn't a problem. Having hepatitis when you're Abdullah the Butcher and bleed buckets every fucking match is a problem. That's toxic.
So, yeah, busting your opponent's head open with the fork, and then busting your own head open with the fork and bleeding all into your opponent and spreading your Hep C to them, that's toxic. It's toxic blood.
Yeah.
Does not have any place in wrestling, but that works for Toxic Collision. So for my first match, Abdullah, I think he's like 75 or 80 years old now. I think he can still have a nice bloody dog collar match with Punk. Bring it on. Toxic Collision, the first main event.
Absolutely.
Let's do it.
Now that'll come up in my runners up, but my toxic is a former Intercontinental Champion, a man of legendary status, former amateur, very powerful in the background, and as a result used that power, allegedly, to entice young men to perform on him. To get ahead, as it were, in the WWF. I mean none other than the very first Intercontinental Champion himself, Pat Patterson, who, I don't have a problem with him being gay. I have a problem with him using his power and his position to try to groom young, impressionable wrestlers to perform on him for sexual favors. What a surprise that he would do that, considering his boss was Vince fucking McMahon. Talk about toxic.
If we only had some people power here to talk about Pat Patterson, it would be perfect fitting to the end of this draft. But yeah, Pat Patterson, when he did pass away not too long ago, there was an incredible outpouring of support and people talking about his influence on the business, his positive influences on the business, not so much of his negative. So, I mean, you hear some stories I'm not sure what to believe. But yeah, Pat Patterson, he was toxic.
Knowing his boss,
yep.
I'm prone to believe a fair amount of them.
Yep. Yeah, I think Roddy Piper had some allegations about Patterson when Piper was 18. Yep. So yeah, not good, Pat. Sorry, you're stuck on toxic.
Now he's probably going to be working backstage somewhere because he's best from the back.
Right.
All right, so who are your two runner-ups?
So my runner-ups, I got a couple here. Just two. Sasha Banks. Okay. I understand why she didn't want to go through with the rest of her contract in WWE, but if you disagree with creative, it's never a good idea to bail, in my opinion. So Sasha, we saw it once with WWE. She's doing her thing with New Japan right now, but it's going to be interesting to see what she does next. And I think if she comes to Toxic Collision, she'll fit right in. So she was my next runner-up.
She had some valid reasons why she did what she did, but I think quitting a job is definitely a toxic move. So that makes sense. Now, mine is another person who causes far too much blood. He actually has an entire match named after him and the type of damage he did to a person in the ring. I mean none other than the mass transit attacker himself, New Jack. New Jack is toxic as fuck. Please don't kill me. Please don't kill me, New Jack. Please don't kill me, but you're toxic as fuck.
Well, New Jack's no longer with us, so you don't have to worry about him killing you. But...
You don't know that. You don't know that. That dude is so toxic, he could come back as a ghost and choke me to death. It could cause me to bleed from the afterlife.
Just in our fantasy draft here, just some advice to Toxic Collision members: don't no sell a New Jack move. When he calls the finish, lay down and take that 3. Otherwise, you're going to be unconscious when you take that 3, and you may never wake up.
Don't cross him ever.
No.
And who was your last toxic pick?
You had mentioned mass transit. This guy did something similar to the New Jack mass transit incident, but it involved Arn Anderson.
Oh, yeah.
You know what I'm talking about.
I do.
Sid Vicious.
Yep.
If you get into an argument with him, he'll stab you right in the ribs with a knife.
Scissors. He will chase you down with a pair of fucking scissors and stab you in public. That's pretty toxic.
Also, you're possibly the most genetically gifted wrestler ever. Like, if you had a computer come up with what would be the ideal wrestler to succeed Hulk Hogan in the industry, Sid Vicious. There you go. He's just as tall. He's bigger. He's more chiseled. He looks meaner. But
he couldn't talk.
He couldn't talk.
We're live, pal.
Few cans short of a 6-pack upstairs. The elevator didn't go to the top, and he was more interested in softball than wrestling. So,
he really was.
That doesn't work for me, brother. I'm taking the summer off. I want to win a softball championship. So yeah, you can have someone else carry your promotion. Yeah. Just a memo to Sid: don't try any of them top rope big boots.
No,
not good for your.
He didn't want to do it. They made him do it. And speaking of, my last pick was the guy who made all of the toxicity in WCW possible. The guy himself, who still bitches to this day on his podcast. The guy who takes credit for ideas that were in Japan, that all he did was implement them in WCW to tremendous success. I will give him credit. He was absolutely influential. But if Hogan is my number one toxic man, Eric Bischoff closes out. He's technically my number 2. He had the entire industry in the palm of his hands. Yes, he had it snatched away because of management and because of things behind the scenes he had no control over. But at the same time, that dude was toxic as fuck. And you can tell he still is toxic. He still is, that's for sure. He fucked up Impact. He tried to fuck up WCW. Or no, he tried to fuck up AEW at least once. He went back to WWE a couple of times. He's still trying to go back to WWE. The dude's a sycophant, and he has absolutely no creativity. He ran a business that could not fail into the ground. They lost money year after year, and it was his fault, and he won't take any responsibility for it. That's toxic.
Definitely toxic. I thought I heard that Bischoff was just on WWE recently.
He might have been. I don't know.
I thought he did something with, but I'm not even sure. I try not to read any mentions of that guy, since he was all about AEW until he was on AEW, and then Tony didn't offer him a job, and apparently he asked Tony for a job, and Tony said no, and so then he turned on Tony and turned everything into a dick sizing contest about AEW versus NWO from 25 years ago. But yeah, anyhow, I guess the other, and I'm not going to even get into it, but the last person I was thinking of who was a message is Russo. But I don't think any more needs to be said about that. So thank you for joining us for this comedic look at who's going to be on the AEW Collision roster to join CM Punk and be toxic. And check out Dynamite on Wednesday. There's going to be a huge announcement that's going to shake the foundation of the wrestling industry. And we don't know how many details we're going to get, but there's a lot of speculation out there about AEW's new deal, and including stuff about Toxic Collision. And thanks for joining us. Scott, any closing words?
JJ for life.